Hello and happy Tuesday. It is Tuesday, January 26th, 2021, and welcome to another Tuesday with Thom. Tuesday with Thom, of course, is brought to you by our partners, the Best Girl Consulting Firm. Best Girl consults with utilities, higher ed institutions, associations, and large nonprofits to customize solutions that support your bottom line. First of all, I have to say thank you to everybody that sent happy birthdays my way last week. It was great. It was continuous, and just thank you all very, very much. I am humbled and very appreciative. There were some lucky people across the country last week, some lucky folks in Maryland, where the communicator, Emily Hedrick, is from. They hit the Powerball lottery for $731.1 million. Wow, that's a mouthful. It's also a lot of money. But then somebody in Michigan hit the Mega Millions lottery for $1.05 billion. So what would I do if I won that kind of money? Probably first thing I'd do is move. I like my quiet. I like my privacy because I'd probably gain quite a few more friends and cousins than I would be comfortable with. But here's some information for you if you ever do win. You can remain anonymous if you live in the states that allow you to remain anonymous. Those states that I have are Delaware, Kansas, North Dakota, Ohio, South Carolina, and Wyoming. And Emily, the communicator, told me that Maryland is also in that group of states. I got my vaccine shot yesterday. It was interesting. What's my reaction? No bad side effects. I do have some swelling right here, and it's real sore. So I go back for my second shot on February 12th. It was efficient. We pulled into the Civic Center parking lot, which is a huge parking lot. Everybody's in line. You had to wind your way around, give them your paperwork. Then they directed you to one of the two lines, and in less than 5 minutes, I had my shot, and I was on my way back home. So I go back for my second shot on February 12th, same place, same time, and as they used to say in television, same station. I've always been skittish when it comes to shots because I suffered from asthma, I suffered from allergies as a child, but this experience was relatively easy. So if you want my opinion, it was easy. And other than the little swelling I have, hopefully that'll be gone. Everything turned out fine. So today, Barbara Wallace Edwards and Michael Walker are here, and our G-list guest today is Winona Satcher. Winona is CEO and founder of Maker Studio. She is a graduate of Auburn University College of Architecture, Design, and Construction. She has been featured in Inc. magazine's top 100 female entrepreneurs in 2020. She's been CBS Small Business Spotlight, Forbes magazine, and is a Next City Vanguard top 40, under 40 Vanguard. So we're looking forward to having Winona, and she's going to be very, very interesting. So let's see. We got our two roundtable guests here today, Barbara Wallace Edwards and Michael Walker. Barbara, of course, is from Birmingham. Barbara, how are you this morning?
Good morning, Thom. I'm doing well. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. I just have to say one thing here, Barbara, about what's been happening with you lately in terms of the show. Technology is great when it works. When it doesn't work, it is not so great. So we've been having some technological issues with Barbara, and it isn't Barbara's fault. Matter of fact, it's not TWT's fault. It basically is AT&T. And so we'll throw them under the bus.
Right.
But, when it doesn't work, it's a pain because it's so difficult today in today's world to actually talk to another human being to try and solve your problem. If you talk to a human being, it's generally after being on hold for about an hour and going through all these exercises they put you through. I, as much as I can, try and do business with small business and try and do business with people who will at least answer the phone. Right. So, Barbara, I just had to make that little speech for you, because I felt like it unfair to you the last 2 or 3 shows with this technological failures we've been having. But again, it isn't you, it isn't us, it's the big boys.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that explanation, Thom. Thank you.
So what's happening in your world, Barbara?
But Thom, there's several things going on, and one is I'm trying to keep up with all the coaching changes at Auburn. I hear that Coach Brian Harsin had finally finalized his staff there at Auburn, and as of yesterday, they had another loss. Coach Tracy Rocker decided to go to the NFL, and so there's a vacancy there. I'm not sure if you're aware of that or not, but yeah, there's another vacancy on the staff at Auburn.
You think Rodney will come back?
I don't know. You know,
Rodney Garner's been the defensive line coach for the
yes.
last several years, and I was surprised they didn't retain him initially, but I think maybe he was tied to
Steele. Kevin Steele. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
Steele. So we'll see. I was a little surprised with Tracy's hiring anyway. Tracy had been on record in the past as not caring for recruiting too much.
Right.
And in college football, that's the game, man.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So it'll be interesting. I'm following that to see what's going to happen next. I would love to see Coach Garner back, but you know, like you said, he was tied to a little bit of controversy there because he was so close to Kevin Steele. So we'll see how that all goes.
Okay.
Also, I got a chance to see a great movie this weekend. I know you're a great movie buff. I don't know if you've seen this movie called The Banker. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. Samuel L. Jackson and Michael, what is his name? Michael, I think it's
Walker.
Michael Walker. Yeah, Walker. No, but he's a new actor. But it's based on a true story about these 2 Black gentlemen back in the late 50s, early 60s who bought banks. And they were so interested in loaning money to other Blacks and helping them, you know, build wealth in the Black community. And it is just a fascinating story. So if you get a chance, check that one out. It's on Prime and Netflix, and absolutely wonderful movie. The Samuel L. Jackson, he can play any role, of course. So he did an outstanding job in this movie. Yeah. And Nia Long also stars in the movie.
I think you asked me what I did for my birthday. Well, I did watch several movies, and one of them was Amour, A-M-O-U-R, which I think translates to love.
Yes.
And it was these 2 80-year-olds who'd been married for about 60 years, and she took sick, and he decided that he would be her caregiver. And it was very, very touching. I mean,
wow.
One of the things I in our my UCLA class this summer was a writing class about writing your characters, and they called the guy called it affecting your characters, so that what your characters do affects the audience and has a pull on the audience. And watching that film, man, that was just incredible. I mean, I couldn't, you know, I wasn't sitting there crying, but it tugged at my heartstrings.
Wow. See, I probably would have been bawling by the time the movie ended. That sounds like one of those heart-wrenching stories.
It was really very well written, very well acted out. Enjoyed all of it. So let's see if we can get Michael Walker on here with us. And Michael, are you there?
Good morning, Thom. Good morning, Barbara. How are you all today?
Morning.
Doing great, man. How you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you very much.
I know you just heard Barbara just put you in a movie with Sam Jackson. I guess you heard that.
Yeah. And you were great. You were great, too.
Thank you very much. That was my debut.
What's happening in your world, Michael?
Well, you know, Thom, we're still dealing with COVID and people that are going without insurance. The Kaiser Family Foundation said that there are millions of people that are eligible for the subsidies that Obamacare provides to help people get insured. And their study found that in 2019, there were some 29 million Americans that went without health insurance. And because of COVID, that number is looking to increase several times over. We don't have the numbers yet. But the gist of the article is to let everybody know that, there are 4 people out of every 10 that are eligible to obtain insurance at low or no cost coverage under the ACA, which is affectionately known as Obamacare. The previous administration was trying to dismantle it, render it ineffective by not providing funding to it, and basically trying to make it illegal. Now, with the change in administrations and the attitude, we don't expect that to happen. Hopefully, it will get more funding, and I'm sure it'll go that way. But I just wanted to let everyone know that if you're an individual and you make less than $51,040 a year, or if you're a family of 4 with income below $104,800, you can qualify for subsidies that will assist you in getting insurance. And for those of you that don't know, the ACA or Obamacare is the federal marketplace. And depending on the state you live in, there are several carriers that participates in this. And according to the study, about 10 million people of that 29 could qualify for the subsidies. Wow. So, and again, one of the things that I was lobbying for was for the former administration to declare a special enrollment period due to COVID. For some reason, the person at the top didn't think that made sense. But in some states, some of the carriers, especially on the Medicare side, provided a special enrollment period due to COVID because people were unable to meet and do different things. Because let's face it, COVID just was a disruptor in 2020, regardless of what you were trying to do, whether you were stricken with COVID or not, somehow it impacted you and your ability to function under a normal circumstance. So I expect things to get a lot better on the healthcare market in the years to come.
It's interesting when you say that it how it affected us. And I thought about this the other day. I don't remember the last time that Michael, that I saw you in person or that we sat down in person. I don't remember the last time I've seen Barbara in person. But I feel like I see you guys all the time, And it just shows how our world has changed, because I know that I would have Michael we generally will hook up in Auburn once or twice a year and laugh and talk. And I see you down there, Barbara, but I haven't seen either. And I thought about that. I said, when's the last time I saw either one of these guys? But I feel like I see you all the time. So
right.
Michael, let me go back to one thing. You said you were lobbying for this. Who did you lobby? And take me through that.
Well, when I say that, it wasn't directly from that standpoint. Because
I was wondering if you was working with your guy, Bolio.
No, I wasn't. Don primarily deals with state, what have you. And by the way, he was named top 10 lobbyists this past week and received awards. So congratulations to Don. Yeah. But when I talk about that, normally what we do is we go to Washington once a year, usually around February, and we go and meet with the senators and congressmen. And that's the time that we get an opportunity to talk about it. Unfortunately, because of when COVID hit, we had just left Washington and it wasn't on our radar screen. So we then had to gather ourselves and try and catch up. So it was more of trying to work between back channels and suggest and ask, and one person that's a part of the association that works with policy and stuff, I spoke with her about this. And she basically said, well, the it has been suggested to the president and the people on his staff. However, with him trying to sue to dismantle Obamacare, it would be hard for him to come back and issue a special enrollment period.
Why I never understood, and I'm going to call it an obsession, the obsession with trying to get rid of something that was basically helping people. You go
Political. Politics.
Well, yeah. Well, Barbara said it. It's just that, and I understand the question that you're asking, and you're asking it from a rational, logical perspective, especially when you talk about healthcare. Unfortunately, that decision wasn't based on logic or rationale. It was based on creating a narrative that Obamacare was a failure and that it infringed on people's rights, in other words. And I'm talking about the narrative when the former president ran for election. And there were a lot of down ballot Republicans. I remember a guy here in Georgia that was running for governor. And when he first announced he was running for governor, the first thing he came out in the meeting and say, we're going to repeal and replace Obamacare. And for all the people that did not like President Obama or did not like the way he was moving towards healthcare, they all said it was socialism or universal health care or what have you, and that was a bad word. And you got to give the former president his respects from the standpoint of being able to tap into an emotional heartstring and work it to his benefit. And that's what he did.
And to come up with when you can come up with slogans today that stand for a position that's very difficult and complicated, but if you can come up with repeal and replace, you don't have to go into the explanations. And as you said, if you can tap into the emotion of people who didn't care for President Obama.
Right. Well, as one note, Thom, if you recall, it was always repeal and replace. Well, what were you going to replace it with?
Well, they never came up with that. They didn't come up with the second part.
Right.
They didn't have an answer.
That was going to be in the second administration.
Right. It wasn't Thom. No, it wasn't.
We're going to repeal. We're working on the replace part.
They never had any idea what the replacement was going to be. They were just ready to get rid of what it was.
And just it's always easy to criticize something or someone from hindsight, because they say hindsight is 20/20. So if you were not a part of it, and I'm talking about Obamacare, you can always sit back at something and punch holes in it. Well, if there's a deficiency for the good of the country, for the good of the people you elected to serve, why not plug those holes instead of trying to tear it down? To me, that's good leadership.
Yes.
However, once he got in office, he was kowtowing or playing to his base that hated Obama. So all he had to do is say, we're going to repeal, we're going to replace, and they were all on board. They never thought about, hey, what if COVID happens and you lose your job and you no longer have your insurance? Because about 80% of the American population is on their employer health plans. Okay. So there's somewhere like maybe, 20 to 40 million Americans out there that are self-employed, such as myself, that do not have the access to a large group employer-based health insurance plan. So those people that are employed and were on a group plan, they never thought about COVID coming and stripping them of their health plan. All they thought about is, we hate Obama. We want to get rid of Obamacare. Well, then COVID happens and they lose their health insurance. Now what?
I remember they did one of those man on the street interviews at one point, and they were asking people about the Affordable Care Act. And they asked them if they liked this provision, if they liked that provision, they liked this provision. And they liked them all. They
Right.
said, well, what is it that you don't like? I said, well, we don't like Obamacare.
Yeah.
Okay.
I saw that.
Note to self:
Yeah,
ACA and Obamacare are the same thing. You
same
know,
thing. Yeah.
but
They
who
didn't
can
realize
argue?
that.
What you think about it, Tom? What you're saying? Who can argue with allowing your child to be on the parent's health care plan until age 26?
Right.
Usually, when kids graduate from college, it takes them 2 or 3 years to gain their
For
footing.
sure.
Okay.
Sure.
And to find employment that's going to provide them with health care. So if your
Right.
parents are in a stable position and they have a family group plan through one of your parents' employers, why not allow the child to be on there until age 25? And
Right.
and then when they
Either
turn
that,
26,
Michael, or a lot of the kids now are on that 5-6 year plan. They don't graduate in 4 years, so yeah, they
well,
needed
that's
to stay
true.
on their parents' insurance because
Absolutely.
they were still in
Absolutely.
school.
Well, and
Yeah. Now,
also when you graduate, I don't know. Generally, there are very few people who go into that first job and stay
it's
True.
rare.
for 10,
True.
15, 20. They generally go into that first job, and after 3 or 4 years, they transition to where they're going. And that first job may not provide insurance.
Absolutely.
Right.
And there's a lot of them that don't now. When we came along,
Right.
and they provided insurance, they provided pensions, they provided all those benefits that my dad got from working in the
Right.
steel plant.
Right.
But that's not the case anymore. So
Right.
let me skip the subject here so we can move on, and we're going to get to Winona. Super Bowl,
Yes.
Kansas City
Super Bowl.
or Tampa Bay? Who you got, Barbara?
I got Kansas City. Kansas City.
Okay, I
I'm
think you're
voting for
excited
Kansas
about
City. I am.
it. Michael?
Well, I'm kind of torn. Only reason I'm torn is because I always try to support former Auburn players. And there are 2 Auburn players, I think, if not 3, on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
There's 2. There's 2.
Carlton Davis and Jamal Dean.
Right.
So
they're the starting corners. Isn't that amazing?
and they're both a starting corners.
Yeah, I saw that the other day.
Yes,
Yeah,
all year long.
Cool. Yeah.
So I like to try to support former Auburn players that are in NFL, and I would like to see them get a Super Bowl ring. On the other hand, I'm kind of I'm with Barbara. I'd like to see Kansas City win, primarily because not so much that I hate on Tom Brady, but I'm tired of Tom Brady, according to the sports pundits and the talking heads. He can do no wrong. He's this,
Right.
he's that.
Now he's the greatest ever.
Yeah, but if you look at
Sunday.
If you look at this team, they want to say that they want to give Tom Brady all the credit for taking Tampa Bay and put them in the Super Bowl. Tampa Bay was a good team before Tom Brady got there.
Definitely.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
They had a great defense, and this has been coming for a while. They have a great offensive line, and they have some stud receivers. So I dare say that had he stayed in New England, they would not be in the Super Bowl.
I agree.
Okay?
Right.
They weren't in the Super Bowl last year, and he was there. But now they want to make it seem like Tom Brady is taking Tampa Bay to the Super Bowl. And that's, I have an issue with that because they're not looking at it objectively. But I guess they're not supposed to.
We'll see what happens. I like Kansas City just because I like that playground offense they run. I like that backyard offense.
It's exciting. Very exciting.
What's up?
They do all kinds of things.
Tom, let me ask you this question then. If you like the Kansas City playground offense, why you didn't like Gus' offense?
He said the magic word.
I'm just asking.
I'm just going to have to
make it work.
Here's the thing about the playground offense for Kansas City. It's designed to get that ball into the hands of the playmakers without it being a big risk, really. I mean, sometimes that number 10 catches the ball he down the field, and then he runs 50 yards. And so I just think it's a very well conceived and designed offense, designed to take advantage of mismatches, to take their best guy and put him against one of your not so good guys. And hey, anybody gonna catch those guys in Kansas City. I think one of the things you and I talked about with the Auburn offense in the past was it was high schoolish, and it wasn't deceptive at all. I mean, it wasn't. They were still running down and outs, man. They stopped running down and outs when I was playing. Now if they run down and outs, it comes from the inside receiver, who then runs off the tail of the outside receiver and makes the cornerback and the safety have to make choices as to who they're going to cover. And
kind of like running a screen in basketball, like running a pick in basketball. Yeah, they do that. Yeah, you're right. And I agree with you, Thom. I just had to put that out there. But, one of the things we talked about is Gus' offense was so predictable because you and I could sit in our living room and tell by which player was coming in and the alignment, what play they were going to run. And with Kansas City, you don't know where it's coming from or who's going to get the ball, really.
One last football question to either one of you. So, who's going to be the coach to defensive tackles? You think Rodney will come back, or does he have the option of coming back?
Well, I think if he's offered the job, I think he would probably be interested in coming back. I'm just not so sure that Harsin is going to offer him the job. The word on the street is Harsin's going to go to the NFL, try to find a defensive line coach there, because he wants that NFL connection. I don't know. What do you think, Michael?
Well, Barbara, I agree with you from the standpoint of the word you used earlier, politics. I think from a logical standpoint, he should bring Rodney back. Rodney has proven himself as an ace recruiter and a developer of defensive line talent and putting guys in the NFL. But I think because of political and different things behind the scenes, he doesn't want to bring Rodney back and won't offer him that. But I think I would probably swallow my insecurity, if you will, and get Rodney and bring him back.
Boy, I tell you, I saw where Alabama just hired 2 former NFL coaches to come work on their staff. And, that says a lot. That says a lot.
And Thom, did you all have the Zoom call with Coach Harsin?
We did. Matter of fact, I think they're having another one. It was good. I mean, he talked about football, and he talked about, I think the things I came away with is that we need to be a tougher, more physical team, which I agree with. We need to be able to develop our quarterbacks, which I agree with. And that makes me wonder if they will spend time this year developing Nix, who only has 1 more year left, or if they'll maybe go with somebody younger so that they have the development time to put into it. Auburn hadn't developed a quarterback in a long time. I don't remember the last one. I mean,
me either.
You don't really develop Cam Newton at that level. No. I mean, he was just the best player in college football at that time. And then Nick Marshall was just incredible. But beyond that, I can't say what we've done. And unfortunately, for Bo Nix, I hope that they will give him somebody to work with him, because he's almost slid backwards since he's been there. So any final comments from either one of you? Final comments for this section, I guess I should say.
Well, I'm gonna change the basketball a little bit. I'm excited about the Auburn basketball program since Sharif Cooper has joined the team now. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to catch a game, but that young man he's just fascinating to watch. So have you had a chance to watch any of the Auburn basketball games?
Absolutely, Barbara. I've been all over it, and I agree with you. Sharif Cooper, he is the glue that holds it all together, and he's the engine that really drives the train. They are just a totally different game with him running the point. I will say that just from a standpoint of looking at it, I think that this off season, I would certainly recommend him not going to the NBA. I think that would be a
Right.
mistake if he were to leave to go to the NBA. I think he needs to add some weight in the off season, get bigger, get stronger. He needs to work
Yes.
on that 3-point shot
Yeah.
because people are going to sag off of him because his ability to penetrate. He's going to have a lot
Right.
of open looks. If he can knock down that outside shot on a consistent basis and be able to add some weight so when he goes to the hole, because what people are going to do is what Kentucky did to him. They're going to knock him down when he
Mm-hmm.
comes in the lane. They're
Right.
going to hit him and
Right.
go after his shot. And he's not,
Right.
they say he's 6'1", but he doesn't seem to have the elevation to get up over the
Okay.
rim. And so I
Right.
think that he's got to work on that outside shot and add some weight and stay around the program for at least another year or so.
All right. Well, let's move forward. Another thing I'll say about that is I think when we had Pearl on, I think one of the things we learned is that Pearl adjusts to his talent, and that's good
Yes.
coaching in my book.
Yes.
So let's get a word from our sponsor here, and then we'll be back with our G-list guest. Today's show is sponsored by Best Girl Inc. What is Best Girl? Best Girl is a consulting firm that provides customized leadership, access, and inclusion, public relations, communications, and organizational consulting services. Our clients include Fortune 500 companies, utilities, higher education institutions, small businesses, and associations. We have a team of consultants led by Joyce Gilly-Gossam and Miss Emily Hedrick, and they partner with business and education business clients to promote organizational effectiveness and education, motivation, and leadership. Our customized consulting services include strategic planning, corporate communications, executive coaching, fundraising, and some economic development. Okay, and just to add a note to that, this note is for the communicator, M. Let's add Sean Jones in there when we talk about the team. Sean is new, and she's joined us at Best Girl. Okay, so now let's go to the G list. And the G list is where everybody is a star. You know, Hollywood has the A list, and here on Tuesdays with Thom, we have the G list. And our G list guest today is Winona Satcher out of Atlanta, Georgia. She is CEO and founder of Maker Studio. She's a graduate of Auburn University College of Architecture, Design, and Construction. Has a 16-year professional career, the combination of urban design, landscape architecture, civic revitalization, and community engagement. She's written for Huffington Post, is featured in Inc. magazine's Top 100 Female Entrepreneurs in 2020, the CBS Small Business Spotlight, Forbes magazine, Next City, Vanguard, Top 40, Under 40, Vanguard. Welcome.
Thank you.
All righty, man, that's impressive. So here's what I'd like to do just to kind of get us going. And I certainly want to talk about affordable housing, which is
Okay.
where I think all this sort of started.
Yep.
But so just tell me in your words what you do and where you're going.
Okay, that's a good question. Well, first of all, good morning and thanks for having me on the show. So excited to see you again, Thom. Well, virtually this time. Last time we saw each other was in person. Lots happened since then. So philosophically, I guess what I would say is that I create and develop interesting connections and intersections to forward the notion of equity and inclusion, and I use design to do that. And so, using design for social good really is the crux of what I do and where I'm going with it. So, professionally, I am CEO and founder of Maker Studio, which is a green manufacturing design build company. We specialize in using shipping containers and customizing those used containers, and upcycling them as really interesting, innovative, and creative real estate, specifically around residential, commercial, community spaces with an impact around affordable housing, which is what you mentioned briefly a few minutes ago.
You, I like to think I'm in the creative business. How did you come up with that? I mean, how did that float around in your head? You said, I can do this. I can create affordable housing.
Well, I tell you, at Auburn, I never thought about that I would be even doing this work. It was strictly design. Looking at holistic. Looking at ecosystems, looking at cities. Looking at policies that affect how we develop our communities. I think the transition from looking at a larger vision of community development to a more specific space around housing and material, specifically shipping containers, was when I used to work for the city. So I used to work for the city of Durham, North Carolina, and very interesting, completely different than the private sector when I started out graduating from school and working in design firms. But it was really the work with the city where I learned a lot about fair housing and the practical application of what really happens when you try to apply design to solve critical problems. And what exactly is the problem? What exactly are we trying to solve a problem? We're trying to hit a symptom. What is my position and why am I here to do something greater for the greater good? I think the most frustrating part was that, the work that we were taught at Auburn Design School and just growing up, we were always taught to be change makers and to solve large problems. Well, in local government, it's not that easy to solve new systems. And so learning the issues and learning the challenges really propelled me to want to create new systems versus trying to disrupt old ones. And to me, everything starts at home. And so why not start with how do we design spaces and communities for people where these spaces and places are inclusive, but they allow for freedom of thought and they allow for the opportunity to have a voice, so that people know that wherever they came from, however they started, it is important, it is impactful. And how do we create a platform that allows that to expand? So working with fair housing, the Division of Fair Housing, when I worked for the city, and working with code enforcement, working with community engagement. I mean, it was this really interesting intersection of proactivity and reactionary work. Led me to, okay, how can we, what is it that I can do to forward this notion of fair housing, to forward this notion of affirmatively furthering fair housing practices, to develop more affordable housing and housing affordability, which is different. And to do it in a way that is collaborative, where the community has a role at the beginning versus at the end. So with that being said, I started an innovation lab at the city of Durham. And that was really interesting work at the intersection of all these different players, including the technologists, the techies there in Research Triangle Park, urban agriculturalists, you name it, farmers, artists. And I started looking at, I had found this project, I think it was in New York, where these two farmers had created, I guess, a pop-up farm in a shipping container. I thought, wow, that's pretty neat. You're recycling an existing material. And part of what I've always been interested in is sustainability and looking at how to reuse materials that we have in abundance that's just kind of sitting there and causing more blight. And the more that I tested the idea and getting feedback from the community in Durham, a lot of, from the farmers to those that own restaurants, even those that were interested in housing, real estate developers thought this would be a cool idea to pilot solutions using shipping containers. That was back in 2012, 13. So I've been thinking about it for a long time. I will say that local government is not the most innovative place to work in a lot of ways. And so I lasted like 4.5 years. And after that, that's when I started Maker Studio, moved back here to Atlanta and just went full force on the shipping container idea, shipping container approach. To make a long story short, that really is how I started and moved forward with the shipping container piece. I will say from the equity and inclusion piece, when I was at Auburn, we had a chance to work with in the landscape architecture department, BB King. BB King is from Indianola, Mississippi, and we were able to, they essentially wanted us to create a blues museum, but not very touristy, more based off of the history of blues music and racial strife and how blues came about. Very interesting project, and got to go to Indianola, Mississippi. This was about like 2002, 2003. Stayed there for a week. Very interesting place, and met a young girl who worked at a fast food restaurant, young Black girl who told me she had never heard of the civil rights movement, and that was a big blow to hear that. And after a while, it made me realize that, hey, if she had a safe space where she could learn her history, understand more about her power as a young a Black girl in the United States, in Mississippi, a place where she can thrive. Could we create these spaces, these temporary pop-up spaces, using these shipping containers? Could these containers be more than just housing? Could they actually be places where people can connect temporarily to create long-term impact? So it's really using, what we do is use design, manufacturing, and this notion of equitable civic engagement, and using design to catalyze that. So that's what all those things led me to today, and that's what we strive to do.
One of the, you said something earlier, and I thought it was really interesting. You said, am I going to solve a problem or just hit a symptom? Mm-hmm. And could you go into that a little more? I think I know what you're talking about. And I think we hit a lot of symptoms and don't solve enough problems. But let me let you comment on that, please.
Yeah. So I think part of it is understanding your why and your purpose and your role, and understanding what actually is the problem that you're trying to solve. It's interesting. I was in a conversation a couple of years ago with a professor from MIT's Media Lab, and we were talking about community engagement. And of course, at that time, I was working for the city, real community engagement, not just going to a meeting, but literally, engaging community advocacy from the ground up. And he asked me where I went to college, and I said, I went to Auburn design school. And he said, what's interesting? He said, as a professor at MIT, I noticed that students here, world renowned, they're known for being just amazingly talented at problem solving. But what I have not seen, and what it appears from the work that you're doing and what you learn from Auburn, is that potentially your work can be good at actually understanding what the problem even is. So it seems like we collectively have been putting a lot of money and work time into symptoms, into tools, versus the actual infrastructure, the actual problems that exist. And I think a lot of it has to do with not focusing enough on peer-to-peer, on personal relationships, but more on almost technology, on connecting people without understanding the actual connections, without understanding where people come from, why they do what they do. Again, everything starts at home. So in the housing space, we begin to realize is that you hear these mandates that people want to, and politicians want to put more money to affordable housing. They want to put more money to stopping gentrification and displacement. But instead of saying we need to put more money to the infrastructure, they're putting more money to the tools. Housing is a tool. Housing has been used, throughout time for blockbusting, for sundown towns, for gentrification challenges, for all these things, but never have we talked about what is the actual infrastructure, what is the actual system in place that has created all these inequities. And really, it's racism. And so for me, it's one of those questions: are you going to? Is my role such that I'm going to fight, this racist structure, these oppressive structures, or am I going to spend my time building new systems and building things so that when these structures fall, we have a new plan, a new legacy, a new platform to catalyze more equity, more inclusion? It really is about my role. And I realized working for local government that my role was not to change a system that couldn't be changed. It just was not something that I could do by myself. And that was a hard pill to swallow, because I had been raised to be a change maker. And so I realized, though, that what I did was leave an impact. And that was enough for people to start thinking about, well, what can I do to forward what Winona was trying to do now that she's no longer here? And what I realized is that the opportunity for my work specifically really isn't about disrupting existing systems. It really isn't about me. It really is about using my work not to empower people, but to inspire people to make their own decisions and to create their own change. That to me is more of a systems change than just disrupting the existing one. When people find their own capacity and understand their own value and their voice, now you're talking about incremental change that is necessary for new systems. I mean, it's very complex because you have to analyze all of the realities that you thought were the problem, when in fact they're just symptoms. You haven't really gotten to the problem yet, and that takes a lot of work. So I just happen to use design to be able to figure out what is the actual problem. Is it literacy, or is it that this child just didn't have a home to live in? Is illiteracy a symptom of the fact that they didn't have a community where they were loved and surrounded by hope? So I think we need to get more into understanding what the actual problems are, where leadership is followship, where people follow your optimism and follow your hope for a better world versus just throwing some money at something and then wondering why it doesn't work.
Okay, that's awesome. Let me bring Barbara Michael in, and have them ask you some questions, and then we'll come back. Barbara.
Yes, Winona, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm just totally impressed with what you're doing there in the Atlanta area. Tell us a little bit about the name of your company. How did you come up with Makers as the name of your company?
Yeah, good question. So, well, we make things, but I didn't want to use the term maker, the same spelling, Makers, that's used all the time. So I looked up the term mockers, and mockers is, the good news about the word mockers is that it means that someone who's really out there and wanting to make a change. The bad part of mockers is someone that, and I think it's Yiddish by origin, and it's someone that is really obnoxious. I'm not obnoxious, at least I don't think I am. But I love the spelling of it because it's hers, Hers. And as a female-owned business in a space, manufacturing, construction, that's typically male-dominated, I thought, wow, that could actually be a cool spelling. But let's say makers, because we make things, but spell it as mockers, Hers, because I'm a female-owned business, and I'm here to support and promote and encourage women who naturally are community builders, honestly, to do more of that. And so that's how we came up with Makers.
Great. And I know you're a native Atlantan. You live there in Atlanta now. But have your work expanded outside of the Atlanta area? What other areas have you done, building in? What other communities have you gone into, if any at all?
Well, sure. So prior to starting Makers, my career really started in North Carolina in Southern Pines, Pinehurst, and then Durham, Raleigh, Chapel Hill. And that's where everything really took off with the community engagement, the design, community planning, economic development, fair housing policy. I mean, it was just an immense amount of information during that part of my career. As far as Maker Studio, right now, we are just in the Atlanta metro area. But we are working towards gaining some investment and funding to be able to scale across the country. So that's what we're working on right now. And we're currently talking to some contacts in Michigan, LA, DC, and New York, for those that are interested in us scaling there and doing some of our affordable housing work.
Wonderful, great, thank you.
Michael, can I just sneak one thing in here? I just want to say, Winona, I mean, you can have these visions and you went to work for the city and all, but then you end up becoming an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Was that entrepreneurial spirit always with you? Is that where you knew you would go?
Not at all. In fact, this is the second time I've been an entrepreneur. So I started a small um, company, small meaning just myself, which is how a lot of these companies start,
Right.
um, during the 2008 recession. So the recession is really what propelled me to become an entrepreneur. And it's funny because I had just bought my first house right before I was laid off.
Mm.
And so it's interesting how those kinds of situations, you become very creative when you have when you're up against a very negative space. And so that's when the entrepreneurial bug hit me, because first of all, I realized I could do it. And secondly, I realized that if I stuck with it long enough, that I could actually be successful. The beauty of it was still being young, needing healthcare coverage and all that good stuff. It's like, well, I still got to get a 9 to 5 job. I have to get a 9 to 5 job. That's the whole point of going to college, and did that. But that didn't last as long as I thought it would, because again, I couldn't make as much impact and change working for someone else. And so because I had become an entrepreneur the first time, I realized, you know what, I'm going to do it again. But I've matured and I've learned so much more about what it means to be an entrepreneur and to lead, to follow. And so I was a little bit more comfortable this time around as an entrepreneur. So it really was being put up against a very bad situation, making the most out of it. That first company allowed me to, again, when you're doing everything by yourself, you learn a whole lot about what you're actually able to do. I didn't even know I could do these things. I didn't know that I had that kind of resilience. Now that I know, let's monetize it and let's make as much impact as I can. Yeah.
That's just great. One thing about being an
Yes.
entrepreneur is when you turn 50, then you realize, okay, nobody's gonna hire me now, so
Yeah.
I'm in. This is what I'll be doing for the rest of it. Michael, your shot.
Well, thank you. Good morning, Winona. Glad to
Morning.
have you here. I want to commend you on all the accolades and the awards that you've received and all the recognition. So congratulations on that.
Thanks.
I have a couple questions. The first one, I'd like for you to expound on you being the project manager for Chattahoochee Now, which involved convening and activating Atlanta's waterfront. I've been here in Atlanta since 1986. I didn't know we had a waterfront in
Yep.
Atlanta.
Yep. I hear that a lot. Well, there's a lot of reasons why that is said. One of the reasons is coming from just personal perspective and personal experience. So, as Black Americans growing up in these United States, North and South, but especially the South, where you had the segregation. Well, segregation, part of that wasn't just housing. It wasn't just, not being able to drink out of a water fountain. It was also the ability, to participate in recreation. And so the notion of the Chattahoochee River being a place where we have a river, it was a 100-mile river here in Atlanta, available to all was not the case. And in fact, it was almost seen as a place, as far as Black Americans were Black Atlantis was concerned, to not go to. But it was a very beautiful place for wealthier white and middle class white residents to partake in recreational purposes, swimming, canoeing, and so forth. So the history, the racism has lended itself to us not even knowing that we even have a waterfront. From urban design standpoint, most major cities have a waterfront. Chicago, LA, New York. Atlanta's one of those cities that is interesting, where we're just not known for that, yet we've been successful in how we've grown. But we do have a 100-mile river. Of course, 70s and 80s and early 90s, it was very disgusting, very, very dirty. And so now there's this huge opportunity to reclaim and revitalize the Chattahoochee River as Atlanta's waterfront, as Atlanta's river. Even though it's west of the city, it still is a very viable economic development and community development opportunity. What we have started seeing, and through my working with Chattahoochee Now for a short period of time, you're seeing a lot more equity conversations. And Chattahoochee Now really was the organization that wanted to talk more about equity, because we know once you start developing a park, the Beltline, you start developing all these spaces, all of a sudden people start getting displaced. So how do we proactively attack the notion that, hey, we can develop parks and river spaces with everybody in mind, as inclusive as possible? And so you're starting to hear more about, the various creeks we have here in Atlanta, Proctor Creek and new greenway trails, asthma-related issues around the Chattahoochee River because of how dirty and filthy that it used to be. Now people are engaging communities of color more in these, hopefully, anyway, that was the charge, in the decision-making around how do we collectively revitalize the Chattahoochee River. Columbus, Georgia has done a fantastic job with their waterfront space there at the Chattahoochee River. The problems some of the challenges that we're going to have here in Atlanta and Cobb County, you have a lot of private landowners that abut the river, and their attitude is the same attitude with MARTA, where it's like, hey, if we extend MARTA, all of a sudden you have more crime. We know that's not true. And so the attitude is, if we put trails in our backyard, we're going to have people from Atlanta, Black people from Atlanta, walking on trails and breaking into our homes. Well, we know that's not true. So those are the different political aspects and equity aspects that they're going to have to deal more with the Chattahoochee River. But Chattahoochee Now was really great. And it was a group that was filled with a lot of real estate developers, people who do that, and that's what their subject expertise is. I came in more on the community engagement side and the equity inclusion side to try to facilitate more of the conversations around how do we look at the development of the Chattahoochee River, this 100-mile river, mostly from Cobb County to Coweta County, including Fulton, of course. How do we collectively do that across the region and across counties, across jurisdictions, and across landowners? It's a very interesting conversation from a design standpoint, but extremely interesting from just an engagement equity standpoint as well.
Okay. My other question, if you will, we hear a lot of talk about AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and the Green New Deal.
Yeah.
What is the Green New Deal?
Hey, that's a good question. There's so many dimensions to that. From the work that we do, in fact, I just started volunteering on the AIA, the American Institute of Architects Committee for Climate Action, Design, and Equity. And people are increasingly understanding how important that we are to the discussion around green and sustainability, climate change, climate action, sustainability. Usually, though, you hear it from the standpoint of solar energy and tax credit and subsidies for how to, the applications that we put on structures. What I'm interested in is the sustainability behind engaging people of color as part of that conversation. A lot of times is the notion of Green New Deals, and Green Deals has been very elitist in the sense that it's wealthy landowners, those, and even the far left liberal identity with looking at that in order to be part of this conversation around sustainability and green, you have to have a certain level of education, or you have to have a certain understanding, a certain amount of money to be able to put technologies in place. What I'm saying is climate change, sustainability, all these things are integral to equitable community development, or integral to how we engage and how we develop and build healthy communities, healthy housing, whether it's the material, whether it's the application, whether it's even economic development and workforce training. So when I work for the city, part of the green work that the city was doing was, and other cities have done this, brownfield redevelopment and workforce training around solar applications. The problem with that, though, is if you don't have enough work to do, it doesn't matter how much training that there is. Communities of color don't get equitable access to workforce opportunities and continuous sustainable training for new green jobs. What we're saying is that that's unacceptable. And so for me and for the work that we're doing, we're not just building green and manufacturing green. Our charge is to also create spaces and micro factories where other communities, marginalized communities around the country, can build green, can build our spaces. And President Joe Biden just mentioned yesterday, I was really excited I don't know if you saw it, but he came out and talked about Made in America and manufacturing and working with small businesses and elevating small businesses. Those of us that make things in the country to hire locally, hire better, which is a short summary of what he was talking about. If you align that with the notion of this Green New Deal and sustainability and the importance of equitable work when it comes to climate change and climate action, now you're talking about a true new inclusive system about living sustainably and sustaining that over time. So it's very multidimensional, it's very nuanced, but I think at the end of the day, it's going to have to be something, what AOC is talking about, it's going to have to, and Bernie Sanders, even what we're talking about on the AIA committee, it's going to have to be something that is easily transferable to marginalized communities. How can we all take part in green jobs? How can we all take part in resilience? Now, here's the other piece of that though. Usually when you hear about the plan she's talking about, you hear this term resiliency, and that people have to be resilient, and sustainability is resilient, and green jobs are resilient. My challenge though is that I want our communities to be what I call prosilient. The understanding of being proactively engaging in new green technologies and how to live sustainably. I saw this special with Hurricane Katrina where this young lady who was displaced said, you know what, we're tired of being considered resilient. We don't want to have a big storm displace us and then people say we're strong people. No, we want green, sustainable, proactive work and jobs and training before these major storms take place. To me, that's what I'm getting from her, but I think there has to be, there's still a space missing that is transferable to those individuals who are just like everybody else trying to survive. How do we make it something that everybody can get a piece of and everybody can monetize and move forward?
Okay, thank you.
I want to ask a question here. So Birmingham, where I'm from, you have a Black mayor, Black administration, and you have some neighborhoods. Neighborhood where my dad lives. I mean, it was a beautiful neighborhood. Now you have empty houses and junk all strewn everywhere. Where do you start to overcome that? You know, you think, okay, what? And the first thing I say is, well, why doesn't the city do something?
Yeah.
What can we do?
Yeah, it's hard, and that was part of the department that I worked for the city. So I think what happens a lot of times, the government space is really about reaction, and of course by that time it's too late when it really should be about proaction. And the code enforcement space, which is very reactionary, where if there's trash and you call into the city and say, hey, there's a slumlord here, there's trash on the street, somebody's house is falling apart. What you find are various other issues where sometimes there's a senior living in a home that they can't take care of. And they can't afford to take care of it because property values are increasing. They don't have the money to do that. We on one side of the coin will call code enforcement on them saying, you need to get on this homeowner because their property is horrible, without understanding that if they actually had some kind of financial help or support to fix up the house, that's what they would do. And we pass it off as someone being lazy, they don't really care. And no, that's not it at all. And so I think there's going to have to be a shift in how we approach the problem versus just the symptom. And right. And so is the problem this individual doesn't have the financial resources to, number one, not be displaced, to number two, not have a blighted property, to fix up their property, to even know how to do that. How do we hire locally? How do we engage individuals who can provide those services and pay them sustainably through city funds to actually help clean? I'm just using it as an example, clean up and train that particular homeowner, what they know, what are the rights, what they can and can't do, how do we help them, how do we facilitate, and then all of a sudden it's a more proactive approach to cleaning up that blight and cleaning up that trash. On the other hand, you have slumlords, individuals who own properties who don't live there. That happens a lot. And in fact, sometimes people who own properties live in other countries. They have no care. They have no care and no connection to that existing community. And so that becomes an education conversation. That becomes figuring out how do we create and democratize access to even buying property. If it's only a certain group of people that have the ability to buy property, 9 times out of 10, they're not the people who have a personal connection to that place, to that space. And so that's another problem. And so what does that kind of initiative look like? Also, until communities, unfortunately, are gentrified and until you start seeing less people of color and more dominantly white and affluent residents moving in, you tend not to have the rush for police help, or unfortunately even code enforcement help, until more voices are at the table. And what frustrates me is that we tend to call these communities voiceless. They're not voiceless. They have not had a platform that allows them to elevate how they feel about what's going on, what they're doing, what are the numbers they can call, what are the things that they can do to help push positive change versus just being seen as those that complain all the time. So yeah, I mean, so those are some of the issues that, again, it's instead of being reactive, how can we proactively engage these residents and landowners and property owners and provide some sort of accountability to what these slumlords. You also have at the state level, unfortunately, a lot of states, especially states that are politically conservative, are not tenant friendly. You're talking about rental properties, they are property owner friendly. And so unfortunately, that ends up being problematic because a lot of these slumlords will raise rent just because they can, not giving a care about the people that they push out that can no longer afford to live there. So it's very multidimensional. And I think we try to solve these multidimensional problems with one-dimensional solutions, and it doesn't work.
All right. Well, I think we've run over, but we could probably go for another hour.
I think so.
Hopefully, Winona, we can get you to come back sometime, especially as you continue to progress and you've got some new things, and we'd love to have you back and talk some more.
Yeah, I'd love to. Anytime. I love to talk more, as you can see, all night and all day about housing issues and code enforcement issues and design. And we were right in the middle of all of it. Our shipping container work. So sustainability. I'm so glad. And Michael, thanks for asking that question about green. That's a big part of what we're doing in the Green New Deal. But so happy to see, of course, Barbara virtually. Hadn't seen you in person yet.
Yes.
But yeah, anytime, Thom.
Okay.
I love to talk about these issues and how we can all help to
wonderful.
To solve them.
And if we can help you publicize anything or what have you, we'll be glad to do that.
Absolutely.
I think you're doing some wonderful work. So
appreciate it.
Okay. Well, let's Thank you, Em. Okay, well, that's it. Thank you, Winona. Thank you very, very much. And hopefully we will have her back. I want to thank Michael and Barbara. That's it's a wrap for today. Our closing comment is by Gandhi: "We must be the change we wish to see in the world." I want to thank the audience for being with us. That's our show. Thank our sponsor, Best Girl. If you're interested in having your business be a sponsor of the show, get in touch with us. Thank Emily Hedrick, the communicator, our producer. Thanks, Sean, the organizer, Sean Jones. And that's a wrap. Enjoy yourself. Make every day count. Stay safe and peace.